everyone, and welcome to another Homeschool Live. My name is Christine, and I'm your host today. And joining me today, we're talking about finding joy in math, and I'm so thrilled to have Pat Murray from CTC Math joining me. So welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Christine.
And just so you know, that Pat is a I can't talk today. A trailblazer in educational innovation, and he comes from Sydney, Australia. And he has been working on this wonderful program for parents out there. We're obviously going to speak towards homeschooling families, and it's just revolutionized how you do math. This it really takes us away from the traditional just learning through those big, heavy textbooks into this new, wonderful platform that introduces and helps kids learn in a different way, in a more fun way. And I can speak personally to that because my kids obviously love CTC Math, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Pat, why don't you just say hello again and tell us a little bit more about you and CTC Math?
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for that welcome. And look, well, firstly, I'd just like to say I'm very happy to be on the call. And but I would just want to congratulate all the listeners, all the people watching this, the homeschool mums and dads. It's a great challenge you've taken on to homeschool your children, but it's such an important thing to do. I always like to think of it as being, sort of improving the world, one lesson at a time, for your kids. So firstly, I just wanted to congratulate you for doing that, and that you've joined this podcast and listening just also indicates to me that you're really taking this responsibility very well. So congratulations. We'll get started. I mean, Christine, we just spoke briefly before this, but you said you'd just like me to sort of introduce myself a little bit. So
just tell us a little bit about
from Sydney, Australia. So I've always born here, lived here all my life. I've got a wonderful wife, Marie. We've got 10 children, so 5 boys and 5 girls. So mathematically that works pretty well. But we've also got some grandchildren now too. And surprisingly enough, at this stage we've got 10 grandchildren, and again it's 5 boys and 5 girls. So you figure that. But I've always had a great love of math. So when I was even at school, I was pretty, blessed to be pretty good at math. Wasn't so good necessarily at other things, and didn't sort of enjoy other subjects as much. But when I started teaching, I started pretty early, and I found that in the traditional classroom where in the systemic schools that I was teaching at, I did see the kids that I was teaching. They did quite well in my classes compared to necessarily other classes. So I did get a lot of feedback that what I was teaching them was good. But I think the biggest thing I did a lot of after school tutoring, like one-on-one. And what I found with those kids, I could actually show them something and I'd get an immediate response to see whether they understood it or not. And then if they didn't quite understand it, it just might have meant show them it again, and that maybe that's all they needed to see it once again, or I just needed to tweak or change the method I showed them. And over the years, and this is probably I did about 8 to 10 years of one-on-one tutoring as well as my teaching in the classroom. I did refine a lot of my methods and found the ones that really worked and ones that didn't work so well. So I guess I was lucky that I could remember all of those things, and it just came very naturally then over the years then to stick with the methods and use the methods that work really well. So that's how I started my teaching career. And how CTC Math came about was after I'd been teaching in the classroom for nearly 10 years at that stage. And then my younger brother, so it's a family business. My younger brother is a computer programmer, Steve Murray, and we combined our skills and we came up with what is now CTC Math. It wasn't then, it wasn't called CTC Math back then, but the program originally was on on the old CD-ROMs and then DVDs, and then we moved to online. So Yeah, we've been doing this for nearly a couple of decades, more than 2 decades.
Yeah,
Yeah, but and I've been teaching for more than 3 decades. So anyway, I love teaching, and I'm really happy that our programs have been able to reach so many people, not just in Australia or the US, but other parts of the world as well. So that's a bit of a brief rundown on where we come from, Christine. So
that's
hopefully that,
great.
yeah,
And I love the fact that you refined it and redefined it. And because I mean there you hear it all the time, not just in homeschooling circles, but just everywhere, that math is hard. And it depends, once you get through the addition and subtraction, then you start getting into division and then the harder stuff, and then it's hard for the parent, it's hard for the student to learn. And so sticking with just the traditional ways of learning, like so many kids have gone through the system, or even through those old textbooks, just trying to do it the same old way and
yeah,
struggling.
yeah.
And so but then you lose that opportunity to show kids how much math can be cool, how useful math can be, only because they're struggling with it. And
Yes,
so,
yeah. Well, that's right.
yeah,
I think that's great. A couple of great points, Christine. I think the struggle often is, and you mentioned the textbooks. That's an interesting one too, because over the years, if you're just relying on a textbook, it is quite, it can be quite challenging
yeah,
unless you really have a great passion and love of teaching math yourself. It
sure.
is quite dry to look at a textbook. I always remember, well, one of my best teachers I had when I was in grades 11 and 12, a guy named Graham Arnold. And he was a brilliant teacher, and he had, we were doing a very high level of math at the time, but the sort of shortcuts and tips that he gave us, and he gave us different ways of approaching a problem, and it was just marvelous. And he gave us these handwritten notes that were, like, for me, they were like gold. And because it made it just so much, it's made something that was very difficult, particularly if you looked at another textbook or other thing, it was really difficult, but you looked at Graham Arnold's notes, it made it so much simpler. So I remember, these were like gold to me, and I was using them when I was at college and university, when I was just doing some tutoring part-time, as well as doing other things. But I handed these notes to one of the boys I was tutoring, and I said, look, just hold on to them until you finish your exams, and I'll get them back off you. Well, I forgot all about it. Anyway, 6 months later, when I went to get them back off him, he'd thrown them away because he didn't realize
Oh,
how important they were.
oh
So
no.
it was extraordinary. So why I said that, a few years later, when I was teaching one of these classes in school, and this Graham Arnold, he wrote his own text. He wrote a textbook, and I thought, oh, fantastic! I can get this material back. And it was so disappointing when I got this textbook that it wasn't anything like his notes, the really good notes. He actually switched to a much more traditional textbook way. And I was so disappointed. And I was thinking, all these students who could have benefited from what you really know, you've sort of just fallen in the trap of just putting out another
Yeah.
textbook. And I spoke to him many years later, and he actually told me, he said he was actually under a lot of pressure from the publisher. He presented his material, and they said, no, that's not going to work. We've got to stick with something. And I thought, wow,
Oh,
they're actually sticking with something that doesn't work, rather than allowing something to work. So that was one of the big things that I always found, that, okay, any lesson that I produce, any lesson, worksheet, anything, is I've got to give everything I know into that lesson. So I just make it
yes.
as easy as I can, knowing, there's, the shortcuts, the hacks, if you like, want to call them that, the things that work well, and the kids respond to well. So I think it is interesting that we've got the flexibility to do that, because we've always been self-published. We haven't had any sort of outside investment in our
Right.
company. We've always done it ourselves. So we've been in a fortunate position, really, a bit of a unique position to be able to do that. So, but you're right. Yeah, the textbook approach can be a bit dry, and I just know in the last number of years as well, a textbook which might have been 300 pages now is 400 pages and 500 pages. And I just think, well, if you really want to if you really want to knock a kid's confidence, give them a 900-page textbook.
Right?
I think it's crazy, but yeah.
I'll tell you right now, my kids are not reading that textbook. They'll look at one look at that size of that book and they'll be like, no thanks.
Yeah, agreed.
But
Yeah.
and this is why it's so helpful to have something like CTC math, um, because and that's something that for me personally, I used to buy the big box curriculum, and so you would have this student workbook, and then you would have the teacher's manual. And honestly, maybe the first year I maybe used half of that teacher's manual. And after that, I'm like, this is nuts. I don't have, first of all, I don't have time to read through all of this. And I understand it in a different way too. And so I'm not gonna use, so I would be purchasing these things and I'm like, I'm not even using it. So I would look at it and say, okay, this is the goal, this is what we want to do, this is how we get the answer. But then I would explain it. And then half the time you have to find different ways, because how I know how to get the answer is may not be the way that my kids get the answer. They've surprised me too, the way that they work things in their brain, and I've had to adjust accordingly. And so just having something where it's open in that way, where they can interpret things in the way that they can and they understand, is just so helpful, and giving them the skills to problem solve on their own. So you're not just telling them how to problem solve; they have to actually figure out how to problem solve on their own.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that like homeschooling families, face in general is trying to manage the diverse learning needs and pace
yes,
of their own children, right? So even, I mean, as I said, we've got 10 children, and they're vastly different
yes,
in their educational abilities and their interests as well. So some didn't even got to grade 11 and 12. Well, two of them didn't even want to finish math. Their interest was more in the humanities side of things, which is
yeah,
fine. So it is interesting. So I think and math is a particular one where I do know that a lot of homeschooling families handle it okay up to a certain point, and then it
yeah,
gets to a stage where it does become challenging, and it's just so much experience over the years, sort of dealing with a lot of homeschool mums and dads, and generally what I found is the mums take care of a lot of the education, for not always, but in a lot of the cases. So and in terms of the actual teaching of math, they might be more humanities based, and they're just, because I know all the um, one of my sisters, she was actually a teacher who was but she taught both math and English, which was a strange combination for a teacher, but
wow, yeah,
multi-talented. But most people tend to do either the math or the humanities side of things. So if you're to teach math is a challenge, and it's something that, as you said, we've refined over many years,
mm,
and I think the videos that we produce are deliberately, and we're very intentional to keep them quite short.
yes,
In some cases 3-4 minutes for really young kids, and maybe up to 6-7-8 minutes once they're a bit older and can concentrate a bit longer. But the idea is really just teach them in the simplest way, and then once they watch that lesson, after they've seen that lesson, they can get straight into doing some questions, because I always find, in terms of the limited, I guess, attention span of anyone, really, you've got to make your point reasonably quickly, very clearly, and then they can actually then go and practice that. Okay, so and I guess some of the more ordinary programs, they don't do that. They might spend a lot of time teaching something and go over and over something, and then get the kids to try something. Well, they probably missed an opportunity to get the kids trying something much faster, get them
yeah,
into that learning pattern much quicker than and create their attention. Because one of the other things too is that sometimes kids don't get something straight on the first time they watch something, so sometimes it's just a matter of just watching it again. All right, so
yes,
if you've got a 3-4 minute video that you've shown them, well, to watch it again is no big deal. But if you've created a 15-minute video and they haven't got it and
nobody
you want
wants
to
to
watch
watch
it again,
that
that's
again.
another that's another 15 minutes. I mean, no, you don't want to do that. But unfortunately, that's a way a lot of other people might
Yeah,
teach, and we've deliberately made sure we don't teach that way.
yeah. And it's so true. My kids are exactly like that. need it short and sweet. Like, don't they will I will sit there and watch their eyes glaze over because it's just after a certain point, it's just uh, I don't really want to pay attention to this. And then they'll go and pause the video and then try to do the worksheet, and then they will cry because they're getting it wrong or they don't understand it. I'm like, did you finish the video? No. So okay, but then and then when I tell them they have to watch it over again, let's watch it. Well, I don't want to. So
Yeah,
then and then we go through. The school is just as long,
that's right.
or longer than it needs to be, I should say, and because it was just too much in
Yep.
one. And this is sort of the reason why we kind of focus one subject per day, and so that way they're not feeling like they have to rush off because I do. And CTC math is really great about mastery, and we can probably talk about um, uh, that in when we get dive right into that. But that's what I want my kids to do, is to really take a concept, really understand it before you move on, because it's not about the checklist, because you could
Yeah,
totally
you're not
miss.
just going through. Yeah, you're not just going through the motions with that. Yeah, the idea of that mastery is really building on some solid foundations, and if there's an opportunity where you've spot something that you're not, your child's not as strong as they possibly could be, the ability to go back and fix those areas by just going back. And you might go back a year. I know we've had some
Yeah,
parents who they've started with their kids and they're at a certain level. They might, with a lot of the math, but there's some holes that are missing. And unless you
yes,
fix those holes up, it's just going to make things harder and harder because, as you know, Christine, math is, it's just so progressive in terms of, one thing builds onto another and onto another. It is much that's probably fairly unique with math, amongst other subjects. I mean, if you were, if you're doing a unit in history, you might be able to do a unit just by itself without knowing anything else about
yes,
something else, and you
that is
still go
true.
well with it. But math is different in the fact that unless you've got those building blocks rock solid, you're gonna come into problems. So yeah, so the ability that we've given all our parents that use it, that the kids can go back 1 year, 2 years, whatever they want to go back to, or go forward if they want to accelerate. That's an important thing that we've integrated into our program, and I know the kids respond well to that, and the parents are pretty relieved when they see that they can do it. So it's
Yeah,
important.
we've got some fans watching right now, and so they've all said CTC math is wonderful. So why don't we just dive right into, tell us a little bit more about CTC math. Like, what can parents, if you're not already using CTC math, what can parents expect, as
Yeah.
signing up for CTC math?
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So the program is very simple in the fact that it's based on watching a video. So the kids learn how to do it, and as mentioned before, it's nice and short, nice and concise. No sort of fancy stuff, flying all over the place. And then they get in questions, and the questions are either interactive questions on the so where they'll enter their answers on screen. But importantly, even though it's obviously an on-screen thing, you can print out worksheets, and we even encourage everyone to. Most of the work will be done on pen and paper. So even though even though some people use it, they just use it on a tablet or just
Mhm.
use it on screen to answer the questions. Really encourage working out, and there's still something about using a pen and paper that sort of
Yeah.
switches the brain, works a little bit differently than just being on a screen all the time. So, but in any case, once they put the answers in and so on, everything gets marked automatically. So that's a big thing. And then the
Yes.
reporting behind it all is pretty impressive as well. So you can keep track of everything that your child does, and the reporting go back as far as you need. But that's what premise of a lesson. So short video, kids do the questions either printed out or on a worksheet or just on the screen, and then everything gets marked for you automatically. So that's That's the lesson. So, but in terms of setting up the whole program for a year, even we've made it as easy as we can, in the fact that you can set up a whole program for the whole year by just I think some parents have got it down to about 5 to 10 minutes at the start of the year. They can actually set up a whole program for the kids for the
Wow.
whole year. So
That's
that
great.
and then that means that every time your child logs on each day, a new task appears for them automatically, so it keeps track where they're up to. Anything you can always go back to any lessons. Once the lessons are finished, if they need to be reviewed, you can do that. Or, as I said before, go back as far as you need to sort of fill in any gaps, or go ahead, as if you want to accelerate some of the kids who might be more inclined to work a little bit more. So that's the program, I guess, in a nutshell. Um, I really encourage other sort of resources which I really like outside our program. We've deliberately not haven't made it gamified or anything, and that was, again, very intentional. So they won't find too many games or anything, but I do know kids respond very well to rewards. So I mean, at the time of we're recording here, there's a great website called Cool Math Games, which I quite enjoy, and we've got
Okay,
nothing
yeah, I've
to do
heard. Yeah.
with it. But that's I know there's some really cool games. They're all free on that one, I think, at this stage. But so a bit of a reward if you want a bit of a math game. There's some nice problem puzzles and so on. The other thing I really like, and this is for all ages, and I'll tell you a funny thing in a minute, but it's a fill in words. It's a bit like a crossword,
Okay.
where you've got fill in numbers and so on. I know the kids do really love that, and it was funny because I gave it to my I printed off a few sheets for my grandkids the other day, and had some, so they were having good fun. They were using it, and then after the next day, those sheets there was a few blank sheets hadn't been filled out on the table, and a couple of my older girls, so a 21-year-old girl and a 24-year-old girl that we've got, they're at home, and they had a look, and they were looking at it, and I just showed them a few things, and they sat down, and one of their friends sat down, and it was amazing. So they're sitting quietly filling in this thing.
It's fun.
And it was great because I thought, that's just a great thing, because often, kids, or, they're young adults, but, they could instead of spending a bit of time, scrolling on their phone, looking at the
Yeah.
lines, they were actually doing that. And so my wife came in and she took a photo of them and posted on the family chat. It was a funny sort of, it was great.
Oh, but see, that means that you instilled that little bit of love for math in them, and that's a testament to your work and
Thank
your
you.
teaching, right there. That's a good story.
Yeah,
And
that was nice.
so, and I know you mentioned that it's not gamified in that way, but I remember my younger one, he would just love the star, the rating,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
the
yeah, that's
mastery
right.
star.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
he actually,
I'll talk a bit
yeah,
about how you feel like. Yeah, it was interesting. So yeah, in terms of it's still nice and visual. You have to have a visual sort of program that's appealing. And so there are bits where they get a few right. There's the stars come up, and the
yeah,
stars progress, and if they get 100%, which we give them a good opportunity to get that in a lesson,
yeah.
then the confetti throws up, and that was interesting when we introduced that the confetti. The kids, they were, I mean, it was interesting because I didn't think, oh, we'll put it in, but the response was, unbelievable, from parents and the kids. So, and we introduced it just for the very younger years, and then
Yeah.
it was funny because some older siblings might see their younger ones getting all this confetti. They say, well, where's mine? So
Yeah,
we,
exactly.
so anyway, we put the confetti for everyone, and everyone's pretty excited about that. Well, one of our things we do have a speed skills, which is really important, which is,
Yes.
I think, and that's sort of a gamey type thing, but that's really important. So those things like the basic math facts that you need to know in your basic recall or your multiplication tables, they're so important. And I know people get mixed messages about, what do you need to learn those off by heart? Absolutely. You need your times tables. It's just so
Yes.
important. And just to know all of those facts, just at just you don't have to think about them, you just know them. And I
Yeah.
use a bit of an analogy that you hopefully your listeners will be able to understand, is like, if you're thinking, if you're a basketballer, when they start learning basketball and they're dribbling, they've got to concentrate really hard to learn that skill of dribbling. And then over time, that dribbling just becomes part of the game, because
Mhm.
once you get to a stage, further down the track, if you're playing basketball, at any sort of reasonable level, you're not even thinking about dribbling. You're thinking strategically, who am I going to throw the ball? Who's in the right space? You're thinking all of those things. You don't want to use any mental energy about dribbling. You're just doing that subconsciously. And that's
Yeah.
what your times tables should be. When you get to the older grades, you don't want to be using any mental power, any mental energy. You run out of gas if you're starting to think, oh, what's 7/8 again, and you're going to go through that. And so that's an important one, and that's why we've got that as part of our program. And it's one that you can always you can use that every day if you like. And
Yeah.
I know some parents do, and I think that's a good thing.
I love it. And this is where I'm at, specifically with the multiplication tables. Oh my goodness. And I can see my 7-year-old just, okay, four twos are eight. I'm like, if you just knew it,
Yes,
it
yeah.
would be so much faster. And I don't know. I hopefully it'll click one day that they just
Yeah.
put
They'll
down a
keep on going. Yeah.
but for now we're doing it the hard way, going
Yeah.
4 times 2 is this, 4 times 3
Yeah.
is
Well, it's interesting you mentioned when math clicks, and it is can be quite different from
different ages
child to
and
child. And
yeah.
I like to tell parents that, and it hopefully takes a little bit of pressure off them, because sometimes parents will say, oh gee, my you know
Teaching.
we should be up to this level, and we're not. And they can put a bit of pressure on themselves. And I've seen so many kids and heard from so many parents over the years who have said, wow, it just clicked, and my child has done 12 months of work in 6 months.
Yeah.
They've done 2 years in less than 8 or 9 months. So that can happen, and it is amazing. So I just want to give that message as well, that if you're struggling a little bit and you're worried that your kids are a bit too far behind, that they're not quite up to the level that they should be, right? And I say
Mhm.
should as in inverted commas there.
Yeah.
Just don't worry so much. Just keep plugging away, and don't be surprised that at one stage it just clicks,
Yeah.
and then they can just go through a lot of material quite quickly. So that's something you can look forward to if you're worried about that. So
Well, I know for my older one, it happened exactly like that. He was on
mm,
CTC math, and we were struggling for a little bit, so we had to go back a year in terms of content, just to catch up and just get the practice in. And then all of a sudden, he was like, "Boom, boom! I did like 6 lessons today." I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh, okay, sure, great." And then can I do 6 more? I'm like, "Go for it!"
oh yes, okay,
So it's yeah, we do have to be remind ourselves to be patient, and
mm,
every child is unique in their journey of learning. And the same thing goes for things like reading. They start reading at different ages, and there's no magic number that says, and this is why I love homeschooling, because you work at their pace, right?
yeah. Well,
So
you've
and
got
they're
that. Yeah, you're really in a unique position that you can do that. You just can't do that
exactly
in the
exactly.
systematic schooling. No, just yeah.
And so, specifically, I know you offer homeschoolers a special deal. I know I took advantage of that. So, tell us specifically how CTC Math is really great for homeschooling families.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, as having a big family myself, I've always wanted to look
Yeah,
after anyone, well, even if they've got just the one child as well, no problem at all. So we've got the CTC Math deal. It's half price for homeschooling families, and we've done that. We've always done that. So that's been great for many years. But we really want to encourage everyone to use the program, because we think that it'll make it's a great benefit for everyone. But but we know that money, money and budgets are tight, particularly these, in these, quite challenging times. So we've always also offered, on top of the half price, a full 12-month money back guarantee. So use it, use it, and we expect that it'll do well. But sometimes it, for whatever reason, it doesn't. So if you know that, okay, look, if I use it for 12 months, and if I don't, if the kids haven't responded the way I liked it, or didn't quite do what I wanted to do, that's okay. We're really thankful that you've tried it, but you're well back with our money back guarantee. And I think we're the only company that will provide that, I think. But we've been doing that for, well, I was going to say 20 years, but it's actually, I think, 23 years now. So yeah, we always think that's a really important thing. And
yeah, and I can tell you, a few of us here, we appreciate that. And honestly, I mean, the cost of curriculum in general is just, it climbs really high if you're not careful, really quickly. And so to have, I mean, we just feel special that you offer that to us at that special price. And we did add that link in there in the chats to check out ctcmath.com and how it works, and you can get more information if you weren't you had more questions. Let us know how they can really get in contact with CTC Math and find out more.
Yeah,
I think it's just that website, right? But
so ctcmath.com, and people say, what's the CTC stand for in CTC Math? But we always thought it was cut through curriculum. So cut through curriculum, and other people have said, well, it's cut the rubbish, and then then we've had even I remember one homeschooler, young little girl, she wrote in and she says, I know what it is. It's count the crocodiles, CTC, count the crocodiles. But anyway, so ctcmath.com, and you were going to put the link there for the homeschool. If you can put that link there, because I don't know off the top of my head the homeschool.
There we go. Yep. There we go. Yes, and perfect. It's in the comments as well.
It's in the comments too. So that's great. But if you've got any questions, just reach out, email through, or there's a phone number there. You can contact us. But hopefully it's reasonably there's a how-to video, how it all works, and so on. If you need to dive in. But yeah, we've got. But there's also a free trial. You can just sign up without credit cards or anything like that as well, if you really want to dive in and have a look. So I encourage you to at least do the free trial.
Yes, that's how we started, and then we stuck with it. So definitely take advantage of the free trial.
Of the free trial, yeah, I think that's the best way forward. If and then. And also, if I didn't mention, we just have a single student or it's a family package. So, and the family package could be 2 students or 3 students or as many students as you've got there. So
yes, and it's very helpful to do that, because a lot of the other stuff out there, you have to pay per child, and that again the cost goes up. And so I appreciate having the one price for
and that one price also gives access to all the grades as well, so that's important as well, because quite often you do need to go back a little bit, 1 year or even 2 years, but you don't want to have to pay extra for that. So you don't have to pay extra for that. You just got it all there. So,
and that's exactly my story. Was we had to go back for one of them, and just so the fact that we could have, once he mastered that little section that he wasn't quite sure of, we were able to move forward and no problem. And you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for the year because you only signed up for grade 4 or whatever. You can jump wherever you need to go.
You want that flexibility as much as you can. So
exactly.
We built that in.
That's awesome. So you have already shared so many good pieces of advice, but do you have any final words for giving homeschooling parents some encouragement on their homeschooling journey?
Yeah. Well, I do. I think like I said before, very important thing that you are doing for your children. So firstly, know that you are doing a great thing, and also I think the biggest biggest best piece of advice is don't be too hard on yourself in the fact if you think that your child isn't going as well as they could be, or that you could really, you will be surprised at one stage, further down the track, that things will click, that that they'll have different interests as well. So if you're more so into math or more so into humanities or something, don't be surprised if your child is not. So that's okay as well. So that's probably the biggest bit, and just enjoy this whole journey with teaching your children, and yeah, just don't get too stressed about it. Don't get too hung up about if you're worried about they're not quite doing as well as you like. I've had a lot of experience now over many years with my own children
Yeah.
and their friends, and seeing that. So I guess that's the best advice. And I know, even though we have a program that is on screen, I think it's really important that the time that kids spend on screen is very balanced with time they're off screen. I think everyone knows that, but it is a challenge. You've got to, and even I've seen, my oldest kids compared to my youngest kids, there is differences there. So we've got to be much more intentional with the younger ones to help them to keep their communication skills outside screens, up
It's
and
true.
really well. That's really important. So that's, I guess, that's one thing. I guess that the difference between my eldest to our youngest is almost a different generation. If you think about it. So, hopefully that's that's some good advice in amongst that.
It is really great advice, and thank you for sharing all of those pieces of wisdom with us. And thanks for joining us today. I'm so glad that I got to put a face to the name, because I get your emails regularly, and so it was just, I was excited to meet you today. And I'm sure a lot of you out there, who I'm sure you've seen CTC math circulating out there, in social media and whatnot, and all the curriculum sites out there. And so check it out if you haven't. It's worth, even just trying that free trial. And again, thanks for joining us today, Pat. And we'll let you go today, and we'll hope all of you take advantage of this wonderful information. And we'll see you again for another Homeschool Live. Bye for
Thanks,
now.
Christine.